Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome. I call to order the June 1st, 2022 San Francisco Airport Community Roundtable meeting at 7:04 p.m. We are meeting via Zoom, and joining us today are staff to the roundtable: Doreen Stockdale, Interim Roundtable Coordinator; Angela Montes, Roundtable Administrative Secretary; Jeanette Lujan, Executive Secretary, San Mateo County Planning Department; Bert Ganong, Jean Rindell, Aviation Technical Consultant from HMMH. We also have with us Lisa Ozasa, Deputy Director, Planning and Building Department, County of San Mateo; Linda Wallen, Senior Legislative Aide to Supervisor Pine; Bert Ganong, San Francisco International Airport Noise Abatement Manager; and Brian Perkins, Office of Congresswoman Jackie Spear. And we have with us several folks from the FAA. Doreen, would you please let us know who we have from the FAA?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We have Alana Jaris, we have Beth White, we have Fabiola Garcia, we have Joseph Burt, we have Lori Sotomayor. I also see Melissa Holmes and Tamara Swan, who is the acting regional administrator. I think that's everyone. Please let me know if I forgot anyone.
Okay, thank you, Doreen. With that, we'll move on to Ms. Mondes, who will advise the public how they may participate during public comment.
Thank you, Chairman Hindi. For those attending the meeting on the Zoom video conference, we will use the raised hand feature in order to organize any public comments. During the general public comment periods, I will ask those members of the public who wish to comment to click the raise hand feature to speak on that agenda item. For those joining by phone, you may press star 9 to indicate your desire to speak, and then star 6 to unmute your microphone. We will prompt you when you may begin speaking, and you will have 2 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Montes. And with us, we have also Karen Chapman of Congressman Esho in attendance today. Welcome, Ms. Chapman. Okay, with that, I would like to move on to roll call. Ms. Stockdale, would you please proceed?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Okay. City and County of San Francisco Board of Supervisors. No response. City and County of San Francisco Mayor's Office. Ms. Sweet let us know she would not be in attendance. City and County of San Francisco Airport Commission.
Here, Doug Yakel.
Thank you. San Mateo County Board of Supervisors, Supervisor Pine let us know he was not going to be present. CCAG Airport Land Use Commission. No response. Town of Atherton. No response. City of Belmont let us know they were not going to be present. City of Brisbane. No response. City of Burlingame.
Present, Ricardo Ortiz.
Thank you. Town of Colma.
John Goodwin here for Town of Colma.
Thank you. City of Daly City.
Pamela DiGiovanni, present.
Thank you. City of Foster City.
Sam Hindi, present.
Thank you. City of Half Moon Bay.
No.
No response. Town of Hillsborough.
Al Royce, present.
Thank you. City of Menlo Park.
Cecilia Taylor, present.
Thank you. City of Millbrae.
Ann Schneider, present.
Thank you. City of Pacifica.
Mike O'Neill, present.
Thank you. Town of Portola Valley.
Jeff Alves here.
Perfect. Thank you. City of Redwood City.
Jeff G. here.
Thank you. City of San Bruno. Okay, no response. City of San Carlos.
John Dugan here.
Thank you. City of San Mateo. No response. City of South San Francisco.
Mark Adiego here.
Thank you. And Town of Woodside.
John Carvel here.
Thank you. You have quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Stockdale. And tonight I would like to start our meeting by acknowledging that we are on the unceded ancestral homeland of the Hermitage Ohlone, who are the original inhabitant of the San Francisco Peninsula. As the indigenous stewards of this land and in accordance with their traditions, the Hermitage Ohlone have never ceded, lost, nor forgotten their responsibilities as the caretakers of this place, as well as for all people who reside in their traditional territory. As guests, I recognize that we benefit from living and working on their traditional homeland. I wish to pay my respects to acknowledging the ancestors, elders, and relatives of the Hermitage community, and by affirming their sovereign rights as First Peoples. I also pay my respect to Indigenous elders, past, present, and future, and to those who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. With that, we'll move on to the next item, which is public comment. This public comment item is on items that are not on the agenda, and staff will read written comments and allow members of the public to speak.
Thank you, Chairman Hindi. And I also would like to acknowledge for the record that member Carol Ford has joined us. So welcome, Carol. And as a reminder, please raise your virtual hand if you would like to speak on items not on the agenda, or you may press *9 if you are calling by phone. And I do see 3 hands raised, Chairman, so give me 1 second so I can share my timer.
While you're doing that, Ms. Montes, I just want to make sure that members of the public know that this segment of our meeting is for items that are not on the agenda. If you wish to speak on an item that on the agenda, please wait till that item is being discussed.
Thank you, Chairman. And I will first call on Mark Scholl, followed by Darlene Yapley. Mr. Scholl, please accept this request.
Thank you. The temporary GBES monitors in Palo Alto showed 2 troubling results. First, a high percentage of planes were below Class B at SIDB, 17% in one period. And second, that Palo Alto had the second highest number of noise exceedance among all SFO monitors. One would expect Palo Alto to be noisy given the sheer number and concentrations of rivals over the cities, but these 2 measures are exceedances over what should be expected. These are red flags that suggest deeper issues. If you're driving a car and it makes excess noise and periodically pulls off course, you would assume something is wrong and investigate. Instead of investigating, the monitors were pulled. No monitors, no data, no problems. On the Class B excursion, SFO tells us that swapping the DME, which is distance measuring equipment, at the end of the runway for a DME at the center of the runway of the airport for the tiptoe will, quote, remedy the Class B excursions. This doesn't make a lot of sense. And for it to remedy all of the Class B excursions, all of the excursions would have to be on the tiptoe, which is unlikely. And all of the excursions would have to be pilot blunders rather than ATC directives, which is also unlikely. But how will we know one way or another without monitors? According to SFO, a permanent monitor in Palo Alto is being discussed with the FAA, but is, quote, not likely due to the issue of revenue diversion. One would think that the decision would be based on traffic intensity, noise exceedances, and safety. But no, they are based on SFO's unique history, where Palo Alto is not included in SFO's Part 150 or other FAA impact filings that govern where AIP funds can be spent. Why? Because we're not in San Mateo County. The results of the temporary monitor showed that a permanent monitor at SIDB is more than justified, not just because of overflight intensity and noise level, but for safety reasons. It is highly justified and not should be dismissed as a revenue diversion, whatever that means. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scholl. I will next call on Darlene Yapley, followed by Alistar 5. Ms. Yapley.
At the April 6th Roundtable meeting, a vote of 8 to 6 was taken to support proceeding with several Group 1 GBAS innovative approaches. Member Taylor of Menlo Park is the only city in the Roundtable overflown by the Surfer Eddy innovative approaches and objected to only those. Other Roundtable members not overflown by the Surfer IAs would not benefit nor be harmed. Therefore, why would some vote against your fellow Roundtable member on the subject of innovative approaches? I was disheartened that the Roundtable did not support its fellow Roundtable member, given there was no negative consequence or upside to your city. SFO has no plan to do continuous monitoring to determine if noise is worse for the surfer IAs or overlays. Temporary monitoring is flawed. For future recommendations, I hope members will understand if they are impacted or not. And if you are not impacted, will consider and weigh the positions of fellow members who are directly impacted before casting your votes. At the SFO GBAS community meeting hosted by Palo Alto on April 25th, attendees were surprisingly told that the SFO Roundtable approved the Group 1 IAs, and therefore SFO submitted them to the IFP Gateway. No notification to or input from affected communities outside of the Roundtable. The Roundtable should not vote on changes when procedure or approach directly affects communities that are not on the Roundtable. At a minimum, the Roundtable should explicitly state in its motions that it represents solely the cities in San Francisco and San Mateo counties. Unfortunately, the FAA and others are interpreting the Roundtable motions to be representing the entire community versus only San Francisco and San Mateo counties. Please correct this misinterpretation. It is the transparent and right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Yapley. I will next call on Alistair 5.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I'd like to comment on the issue of extending the Roundtable's role to assess and monitor regional consensus for flight path changes. Since the demise of the Santa Clara-Santa Cruz Roundtable last December, this Roundtable is the only body through which the FAA can gather feedback on proposed changes in the area. Yet this Roundtable has very limited regional representation and none from counties affected by southern arrivals to SFO, including Santa Cruz. There needs to be a working plan to remedy this shortcoming. A specific example of a controversial flight path change is the western shift of the surfer arrival path. This was by far the most controversial topic discussed by the Select Committee during its 8-month tenure. A 2/3 supermajority of the 12 votes was required to endorse any recommended change. In the end, a carefully crafted compromise gained the necessary 8 votes and resulted in 2 linked recommendations, one to move the track, the other enumerated 9 required noise mitigating criteria. By December 2017, little more than a year after the vote, the fragile compromise fell apart as Mayor Gary Waldeck retracted support for the city of Los Altos Hills after learning from the FAA that not all associated criteria could be met. Regardless of the lack of consensus, work on the proposed change continued for 4 more years. At last summer's July 2021 workshop, the FAA finally confirmed it could not meet all 9 criteria listed in the Select Committee's recommendation. The FAA should be commended for respecting the Select Committee's intent rather than simply implementing those parts of the recommendations deemed feasible. However, a great deal of work and delay, including preliminary environmental impact assessments, could have been avoided if a roundtable had informed the FAA that the required consensus for the track shift had already disappeared by 2017. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alistair. I will next call on our last hand raised for items not on the agenda, and that is from Rebecca Ward.
Hi, I just have a couple of quick comments. First of all, I do want to also reiterate what Darlene Yapley just said, which is, I think it is important that the SFO Roundtable really make sure that the FAA understands that their jurisdiction is specifically San Mateo and San Francisco counties, and that they have no ability to make decisions for communities outside of that. And hopefully the SFO Airport also understands that. But I did also want to comment on the process. Member Taylor did make a motion that was seconded by Member Whitmer, and that wasn't debated or voted on. And I think it was an important motion because she had initially asked to have the EDI procedures removed and also had mentioned the noise monitoring. That didn't get debated and it didn't get voted on as an amendment. And I think that's a process flaw. So I'd just like to ask you to take a look at that and see if that needs to be addressed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Ward. And with that, Chairman, we have no more hands raised for items not on the agenda.
Thank you very much. And now moving on to items 1 and 2, where we'll consider setting the agenda and taking action on the consent agenda items. Staff will note any written comments and allow members of the public to speak. Ms. Montes, do we have any public comments on items 1 and 2?
Thank you, Chairman. We do not have any virtual hands raised for items 1 and 2.
Member
Okay.
Schneider's hand is raised.
Okay, Member Schneider.
Hi, I'd like to pull the director's report. I have a question on both reports.
Okay. Following the director report, anyone else would like to pull anything from the agenda, from the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none. With that, I would like to entertain a motion to set the agenda and approve the consent calendar minus or absent the director report.
So moved.
Mr. Chair, so moved.
Okay, motion by Member Ortiz and seconded by Vice Chair Royce. Is that correct, Vice Chair?
Correct.
Very good. Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Please roll call.
Thank you. All right. City and County of San Francisco Airport Commission.
Yes.
Thank you. CCAG Airport Land Use Commission. Carol, you may be.
Yes, right.
Thank you.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. City of Burlingame.
Yes.
Thank you. Town of Colma.
Yes.
Thank you. City of Daly City.
Yes.
Thank you. City of Foster City.
Yes.
Thank you. Town of Hillsborough.
Yes.
Thank you. City of Menlo Park.
Yes.
Thank you. City of Millbrae.
Yes.
Thank you. City of Pacifica.
Yes.
Thank you. Town of Portola Valley.
Yes.
Thank you. City of Redwood City.
Yes.
Thank you. City of San Carlos.
Yes.
Thank you. City of San Mateo. Nope. Sorry, they're not present. City of South San Francisco.
Yes.
Thank you. Town of Woodside.
Yes.
Thank you. Your motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Stockdale. Go back to Member Schneider and on the director's report. If you have a question or a comment.
I do. Thank you, Chair. On page 13 of the packet and page, I'm trying to scroll, I didn't write down the second page number. Basically, the noise reports on there. There's an unusually low number from Millbrae, especially from Monitor 9, which is just a few blocks from me. I can tell you I've never received more noise complaints from people living in Millbrae than the last couple of months, especially with quite a few alternate or reverse flow days. So I'm wondering what happened to these two monitors. These are, in fact, a lot of the noise monitor reports look a lot lower than they might normally be, with perhaps an increase in South San Francisco, although I did not go back and compare to previous reports. So both months, both column 1, the noise events average per day. Did anything happen to the monitors or to the data recording during that time?
Okay, thank you, Ms. Schneider. Bert or anyone from SFO, if you have any information to that question.
No, great questions. You mentioned the reverse flow days. That would count for some of the monitors being lower. The overall, the monitors were performing as we expected. There were no issues with them, and we had nothing to report out of the ordinary. But per your question, I will delve into it and bring something back to the roundtable.
Thank you, Bert. To be honest, the reverse flow days are when I get extreme number of complaints because they take up over Millbrae Avenue and then up over Mills Estates. But because of that angular, we know they're not measuring that noise, but we get by far more noise over most of Millbrae, a good portion of Burlingame, and I can't speak for Hillsborough, but those
Actually,
are usually the days that should be higher.
The noise is being measured, without a doubt.
Just, I'm looking forward to when we actually see how it's reported out.
Okay. Thank you, Bert, and thank you, Member Schneider. With that, I'm looking for a motion to approve the director report.
So moved. Specific.
Member O'Neill, thank you. And I'm sorry, who seconded?
John Dugan, San Carlos, second.
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Member Dugan. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Ms. Stockdale, please roll call.
Okay. City and County of San Francisco Airport Commission?
Yes.
Thank you. Airport Land Use Commission?
Yes.
Thank you. City of Burlingame?
Yes.
Thank you. Town of Colma?
Yes.
Thank you. City of Daly City?
Yes.
Thank you. City of Foster City?
Yes.
Thank you. Town of Hillsborough? Mr. Royce?
Yes.
Thank you. City of Menlo Park?
Yes.
Thank you. City of Millbrae?
No, and for the new members, because it's not a reflection of the noise experience of the people of Millbrae.
Thank you. City of Pacifica?
Yes.
Thank you. Town of Portola Valley?
Yes.
Thank you. City of Redwood City?
Yes.
Thank you. Town of San Carlos? I'm sorry, City of San Carlos?
Yes.
Thank you. City of South San Francisco?
Yes.
Thank you. And Town of Woodside?
Yes.
Thank you. Your motion passes.
Thank you. Moving on to our regular agenda item number 3, the proposed budget for fiscal year 2022-2023. With us is Lisa Ozasa is going to give us a brief presentation. Ms. Ozasa.
All right, thank you, Chair Hindi. Good evening, Roundtable members. I'm Lisa Awazasa. I'm the Deputy Director for the San Mateo County Planning and Building Department. Here this evening to present the proposed Roundtable budget for fiscal year 2022-23. The Roundtable bylaws require the adoption of an annual budget, and the proposed budget for fiscal year 22-23 is very similar to last year's budget. It has expenses balanced with revenue and a positive year-end balance and a solid reserve fund. On the revenue side, the Roundtable will continue to be supported at the same level as last year through contributions from its member agencies. Those of you who've been on the Roundtable since 2020 may recall that a budget projection was developed at that time that keeps member contributions the same through fiscal year 2024. As for expenses, for staffing, contracts, operations, and projects and programs, those that are also expected to be similar in the upcoming fiscal year. Regarding staffing in particular, the recruitment for a permanent Roundtable coordinator is underway, and we're hoping to have a new person on board within the next month. Since HMMH was able to provide interim coordinator services on contract for a similar amount that we would have paid for a permanent staff member, staffing costs will remain relatively stable, rising only slightly to account for cost of living adjustments. There will also be a relatively minor increase in contracts and operations expenses if we return to in-person or hybrid format meetings, which seems likely in the upcoming year. We've also budgeted for additional expenses related to updating the Roundtable website, an effort that was started last year but not completed, and that does remain on the proposed work plan for fiscal year 22-23. With that, I'll conclude my remarks and put forth a recommendation that the members approve the proposed 12-month budget for fiscal year 2022-23, and I'm available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ozasa, for your presentation. Very brief, yet concise and very informative. And with that, I'm going to open the floor to members of the community roundtable. Let me see, I do see, bear with me 1 second. I do see Vice Chair Royce's hand is up.
Yes, it's pretty straightforward budget, Lisa. Could you just reiterate for my benefit and probably benefits of others, the process and who effectively submits this budget, who reviews it before it comes to us? Because I'm really not clear on that, frankly, and I should be.
So I'm relatively new to participating in the roundtable budget process myself, but my understanding is that it is the roundtable coordinator that traditionally puts the budget together and brings it to the members. We do review it at the Planning and Building Department with our fiscal staff. And Angela Montez, I will mention, is a key participant in tracking the expenses. And so, you know, there isn't, that's pretty much it. We put it together and bring it forward to the members.
And at least if I could have a follow-up question, I believe there's an annual audit of it as well. Is that correct?
That's correct. So the audit, so what you're seeing in the attachment A there for actual expenditures is only through the end of April. We will be doing a year-end close, but audit, year-end close being June 30th, 2022. So we'll start in July to look back at the past year to do the year-end closeout audit. And we can bring that information to you. I think traditionally we bring that back in August or October.
Okay. I might suggest, Mr. Chairman, that as a procedural matter, that maybe in the future this is reviewed by the executive committee prior to coming to this committee. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. It looks fine. I'm not thinking there'd be any changes, but I would like to have a set of eyes on it from the committee, from the roundtable of representatives before it actually comes for the full roundtable. In case there are any questions or processes or better practices that could be implemented. I just raise that as a suggestion for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Very good suggestion. I will definitely could discuss it. We have a year, but yes, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, next I see Member Schneider's hand is up.
Thank you, Chair. I see on the budget that Millbrae is listed as zero, or there's zero money budgeted for the Chet Cootie room, which is where we have historically met prior to COVID. And that is typically, I think we just got it added as a budget item as an in-kind donation by the city of Millbrae. So if we do, and we are working on going hybrid, we will be approving budget items in 2 weeks for that. If the roundtable thinks that they're going to go back in person, then the most forewarning so that we can make sure we can put in the extra equipment that might be necessary on that would be helpful. And then under video, you just listed it as video, and I'm not sure if that's the video we use as part of Zoom, but historically Millbrae Community Television, which is a nonprofit here in Millbrae, has provided all of the video and microphones and everything in that room. So just make sure that that budget item is reflective of MCTV. I understand the zeroing right now, but you know, if we do get to go back, and I did my first statewide commission in a hybrid format with remote locations today, there's still some bugs to work out. So who knows what the future will bring.
Okay, thank you. Has any questions or comments on the budget as presented? Okay, seeing none, I'll move on to public comments.
Thank you, Chairman. We will now take public comment for item number 3. But Chairman, I do not see any virtual hands raised for this item from members of the public, and we did not receive any written public comment.
Thank you. With that, we will close public comments for item number 3. And with that, I'm looking for a motion.
I would move approval, Chair Hindi.
Thank you, Member Adiego. Got a motion by Member Adiego.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Member Ortiz. We got a motion by Member Odiego, second by Member Ortiz. Ms. Stockdale, roll call, please.
Yes, thank you. City and County of San Francisco Airport Commission.
Yes.
Thank you. The Airport Land Use Commission.
Yes.
Thank you. City of Burlingame.
Yes.
Thank you. Town of Colma.
Yes.
Thank you. City of Daly City.
Yes.
Thank you. City of Foster City.
Yes.
Thank you. Town of Hillsborough.
Yes.
Thank you. City of Menlo Park?
Yes.
Thank you. City of Pacifica?
Yes.
Thank you. City of Millbrae, sorry, I skipped you.
That's okay. Yes.
Town of Portola Valley?
Yes.
Thank you. City of Redwood City?
Yes.
Thank you. City of San Carlos?
Yes.
Thank you. City of South San Francisco?
Yes.
Thank you. And Town of Woodside?
Yes.
Thank you. Your motion passes.
Thank you. Moving on to regular agenda item number 4, the 2022-2023 Roundtable Work Plan. The Work Plan Subcommittee met on May 20th to go over the 2021 Work Plan and updated it to reflect the needs of the Roundtable during 2022-2023. The draft work plan was included in the meeting packet starting on page 26. The main changes that were made are the following. With Congresswoman Spear leaving office, we wanted to create a new goal to make it a priority for the Roundtable to make sure that the new Congressperson is aware of the Roundtable and its focus. We will do this by briefing the new Congressperson and Congress members' staff on all items on the work plan. It was also agreed that Representative Spear's staff will brief the new staff as well. Next, we added to the work plan items under the goal of reviewing and commenting on aircraft procedure. Those are all subcommittee work will include departure noise, day and night for those close-in communities around SFO, not just arrival noise. Working with a technical consultant, the ground-based noise subcommittee will evaluate operational changes that will help with ground-based noise for close-in communities at nighttime. Working with a technical consultant, the Roundtable will evaluate the options for horizontal versus vertical separation of aircraft for reduced impact to the communities around SFO. Those are the highlights, but again, everything was in the staff report in your packet. With that, I would like to open the floor for discussion with the Roundtable members. Does anyone have any questions or comments on the updated work plan? And as a reminder, this is only for this year. We had a strategic plan for 3 years, and this is only for what we are doing this year. Let me go here. I don't see any hands up. Ms. Montes, any hands up that I'm not seeing?
I do not see any virtual hands raised from
Okay, thank you. With that, let's move on to public comments on item number 4.
Thank you, Chairman. And as a reminder, if you are calling by phone, you may press *9 to indicate your desire to speak. I do want to note, Chairman, that I received an email from Jennifer Landesman, and she noted that she was having a difficulty raising her hand. So I did just want to note that. I do not see any hands raised for this item, though. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you so much. With that, I'm going to go ahead and close the public comments for item number 4. And I'm looking for a motion to approve the item.
So moved.
Thank you. Member O'Neill, have a motion on the floor. I'm looking for a second.
Second, Member G.
Thank you, Member G. We have a motion by Member O'Neill, second by Member G. Roll call, please.
Thank you. City and County San Francisco Airport Commission?
Yes.
Thank you. Airport Land Use Commission?
Yes.
Thank you. City of Burlingame?
Yes.
Thank you. Town of Colma?
Yes.
Thank you. City of Daly City?
Yes.
Thank you. City of Foster City?
Yes.
Thank you. Town of Hillsborough?
Yes.
Thank you. City of Menlo Park?
Yes.
Thank you. City of Millbrae?
Yes.
Thank you. City of Pacifica?
Yes.
Thank you. Town of Portola Valley?
Yes.
Thank you. City of Redwood City?
Yes.
Thank you. City of San Carlos?
Yes.
Thank you. City of South San Francisco?
Yes.
Thank you. And Town of Woodside?
Yes.
Thank you. Your motion passes.
Thank you. Moving on to a regular agenda item number 5, FPPC update. We have with us tonight Lauren Carroll, Deputy County Attorney of San Mateo, who will present this item. Ms. Carroll.
Hi, everyone. I'm sorry I don't have my camera on. I have a big west-facing window, and I just cannot get an angle where you would actually be able to see my face without a glare. So sorry about that. But anyway, nice to see you all. I'll be brief. I'm here to talk about the proposed conflict of interest code for the Roundtable. As you might recall, a few months ago, the Fair Political Practices Commission, which regulates government conflicts of interest rules, decided that the Roundtable is subject to the Political Reform Act, and therefore its members must comply with all of those regulations. And part of complying with the Political Reform Act is adopting a conflict of interest code. So here we have a proposed conflict of interest code for the Roundtable. It is substantially similar or even possibly identical to conflict of interest codes that you have encountered in your other public agencies and your public service. So hopefully the terms of it are somewhat familiar to you. But in general, the conflict of interest code says that you must disclose any source of income, investments, interest in real property, or interest in business entities that may be materially affected by a Roundtable decision. So this is referring to the Form 700 that we all know and love. And now you will be required to file Form 700s for your participation in the Roundtable. Ideally, we'll be able to use the San Mateo County filing system. I still have a couple details to work out there and have to get approval from the FPPC to do that, but hopefully we can just use the existing infrastructure for that. And the conflict of interest code also says you cannot make, participate in making, or in any way attempt to use your position as a Roundtable member to influence a decision that will have some sort of foreseeable material financial effect on you or a member of your immediate family. So an example of this would be if all of you together decided you wanted to make Roundtable t-shirts and spend Roundtable money on those t-shirts. And I'm going to pick on Member O'Neill because I know Member O'Neill, and he has a t-shirt printing company. Member O'Neill would probably have to recuse himself from the decision of who to award that contract to is if his t-shirt company was going to be bidding for that contract. I know contracts don't come up a lot in the Roundtable, so this might not be a common issue, but just something to keep in mind if a decision ever comes up that could potentially affect a financial interest that you or your immediate family have. So if the Roundtable approves this conflict of interest code today, we will then file it with the FPPC, which has to approve it itself. And after the FPPC approves it, then you'll have to file initial Form 700s. I don't have the exact timeline. I don't know how long the FPPC takes with this kind of thing, but they're supposed to turn it around within 60 days. And then there's another 30 days to file the initial statement. So I expect I'll be back here in the August meeting to talk with you all about filing initial Form 700s, but probably no earlier than that. If you have questions about your own obligations in terms of reporting, I'm going to direct you back to your attorneys for your respective agencies who can give you personal advice on that, but I'm happy to answer questions about the conflict of interest code in general. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carroll. I think most of us are pretty familiar with the Form 700 and the FPPC requirement and regulation. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and open the floor to members of the Roundtable if any questions for the county attorney. Give me 1 second. I see Member Dugan, his hand is up, and then Member Ford will be next.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and I appreciate the heads up on this. And I would just chime in to say I very strongly encourage us to get in sync with the San Mateo County reporting system. filing completely independent reports would be a lot of double work, and it's actually quite time consuming to gin up a completely different report. So piggybacking on the effort we already all do for our reporting agencies, honestly, I wouldn't really view that as optional. It should be straightforward for us to map into the San Mateo County system, and I truly hope we do that. Thank you.
I agree, and they're ready for us at the county. We just have to make sure that the FPPC agrees. So that's what I'll be advocating for, of course.
Great, thank you, Lauren. Appreciate that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dolan. Member Ford.
I don't see the necessity of it. I understand what Lauren Carroll just said, that somebody else has decided because we have a budgetary thing, but this group doesn't make any laws or rules, and I don't understand the necessity of it. And in particular, I don't have an agency attorney to go to that I know of. So I don't see the reason for it. That's my comment.
Thank you for your comment. I see Member Schneider. I'm sorry, somebody wanted to speak.
Oh, that was the Chair Hindi, and I,
Yes.
I just want to say that your point is taken, Ms. Ford, and just for transparency for everyone here, the decisions that the FPPC determined subjected the roundtable to the conflict of interest code was really the decision that you all just made a few minutes ago to approve the budget. So the fact that the roundtable has money that it's spending, and it's how it's spending that money that the FPPC is concerned about. And of course, that's a small piece of what the roundtable does, and maybe compared to other public agencies, but that is something that they latched onto and decided that the roundtable is subject to these rules. So that's why we have it. And I would also say the attorney for CCAG might be able to help you, but you can connect with me offline on that. But I believe that's Melissa Andrikopoulos, and she can probably give you some guidance.
Thank you, Lauren.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ms. Carroll, for your response. Member Schneider.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Carroll, I have to admit, I've been doing these for 6 years. I already included SFORT when we were due. I think I did mine in March. Did anything show through? If not, consider me a beta test for you on that. And I agree completely with Member Dugan. Let's do it all the same time. That's why I did mine. They are a pain in the butt to do. But let me know if you didn't get it, because according to my process on my end, everything went smoothly and nothing bounced back.
That's very interesting, and I'll have to check on that, but I'm sure it's probably all fine. but thank you for the heads up.
If I have to do it again, I realize that I just was trying to make life a tiny bit easier.
Okay, thank you. Member Dugan, I see your hand up again.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I just want to reiterate my fellow members' comment that the budget wasn't in our packet. And boy, if we're approving a budget, we really should have visibility on that. Just emphasizing our FPP obligations by way of that just further means we ought to be taking a look at that. If someone could please send me a copy of the budget that we approved, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Let me check on that. I thought I saw the budget in the packet. I read the budget.
Is it just that
it is in the
single
packet. It's on
page
page 24. Yeah, page 24.
Okay, that's it. It's that basic.
It's a simple.
Okay,
it's a simple budget.
Very simple.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Okay, thank you. Anyone else? I don't see any hands up. With that, I'm gonna go ahead and move on to public comments on this item.
Thank you, Chairman Hindi. As a reminder, if you are calling by phone, you may press *9 to indicate your desire to speak. But Chairman, I do not see any virtual hands raised for item number 5. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and close the public comment for item number 5, and I will entertain a motion to approve the code of conduct.
So moved.
Second.
And I'll second. Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, No, motion by member O'Neill, seconded by member Schneider. Roll call, please.
Yes, thank you. City and County of San Francisco Airport Commission.
Yes.
Thank you. Airport Land Use Commission.
No.
Thank you. Sorry about that. City of Burlingame.
Yes.
Thank you. Town of Colma.
Yes.
Thank you. City of Daly City. Miss DiGiovanni, I think you're on mute. Okay, no response. She might have fallen off. City of Foster City.
Yes.
Thank you. Town of Hillsborough.
Yes.
Thank you. City of Menlo Park.
Yes.
Thank you. City of Millbrae.
Yes.
Thank you. City of Pacifica.
Yes.
Thank you. Town of Portola Valley.
Yes.
Thank you. City of Redwood City.
Yes.
Thank you. City of San Carlos.
Yes.
Thank you. City of South San Francisco.
Yes.
Thank you. And Town of Woodside.
Yes.
Thank you. Your motion passes.
Wonderful, thank you. Moving on to item number 6, presentations. Let me just make a point of clarification. Last time after the meeting, I received an email from a member of the public inquiring why we are not, or basically he's suggesting that we did not open the floor for public comments on presentation. Just as a reminder, we're only going to be taking public comments on any item on the presentation at the end of the presentation, after the last presentation. That's how it's been done at the roundtable, and we will continue it moving forward. So anyone who would like to speak on any item under presentation, just wait till the last item in the presentation, and we will open the floor to all those items together. So with that being said, moving on to the chairman update would come up first. I'll be very brief and move on very quickly in my report to you. Wanted to let you know that East Palo Alto has reached out to our staff regarding joining the roundtable. And when East Palo Alto does join the roundtable, the roundtable will have representatives from all cities and counties within San Francisco and San Mateo. The next item is Noise 101 has been postponed to accommodate the FAA. I'm being told by staff that we should have a firm date for the members at the regular meeting in August. So stay tuned for that. The technical working group subcommittee will be meeting on July 8th at noon. I encourage roundtable members and any members in the public who are interested to join us at that date. Vice Chair Royce and I attended the UC Davis Aviation Noise Emission Symposium, May 1st through May 3rd. I found the symposium very informative. Topics of note were advanced air mobility and urban air mobility, its integration into communities and the noise impact. One thing interesting I found with urban air mobility, that localities and municipalities will be able to regulate via ordinances where those aircrafts will fly. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops, but that's something coming up and we should keep an eye on. Another item was the sustainable future of aviation, electric urban air mobility aircraft. There's some electric air mobility aircraft coming in as a way of perhaps replacing traditional helicopters. Again, it remains to be seen where the technology takes us. A very important topic for us, I think it was the community engagement and having meaningful community engagement. Specifically, a lot of the topics were around the FAA and enhanced noise metrics and communication. Another topic was the health impact of aviation noise. But I asked Vice Chair Royce to kind of give a more detailed report. Since both of us were in attendance, I simply gave you very brief. Vice Chair Royce, if you are ready, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hopefully I'm heard. I'm getting messages that my connectivity is not very good. So let me know if you cannot hear me. I think you said it very well. It was a 3-day session in the beginning of May, although the discussion points occurred on the last 2 days. And there were 7 different breakout sessions. And as you alluded to, they covered a variety of topics based around more so on emissions and health and noise than I think we've seen in the past, but focus a lot on new technologies that might be coming down the path. We did talk about 4 of those 7 breakout topics at the legislative subcommittee meeting that we had last week. And I'll refer to that when I go to the legislative report. But I would note that there were a couple, I think, of best practices that came out of it. One was a discussion over community engagement and airport commitment to getting community engagement on any flight procedures that I thought were very interesting. It had some good points. The community engagement, by the way, was led by one of our public participants, Darlene Yapley. And she, if you refer at the end of your exhibits today and the airport noise reports, you'll see a write-up on at least 3 of those topics are written up in the airport reports. The community engagement one, unmanned aircraft, and I believe it was on some of the new metrics. So I would refer you to the exhibit at the end of your packet here. I think it's very interesting. There was very little discussion over pending or future or current legislation, which was contrary to what I heard a year ago. But as I'll refer to in the legislative report, there's a reason for that, and we can speak then. I would note that there were some areas that I guess what struck me was the focus on new technologies and how fast it may be coming. And I'm speaking specifically on air taxis, unmanned aircraft, and some of the emission controls and electrification of some of the elements. The unmanned aircraft, at least as it was presented, there may be a noise impact, but there's a lot of focus on reducing the noise, but there clearly will be a view impact. Some would call it a view pollution that we may have to address, even though it's not within our charter. And there were a lot of open questions over who has authority over the governance of unmanned aircraft, but we can come back to that. But by and large, I thought it was a very well-run, very informative report, very concise, and I took a lot of notes. And I would just invite any members of the committee, if you have specific questions on any of those 7 topics that were discussed, please call me. I'm happy to discuss in detail what I remember that was discussed in each of those breakout sessions. But again, what struck me the most was respect to the speed of the technology with respect to some of the unmanned aircraft and air taxis. That may be beyond us quicker than we are anticipating. So with that, open any questions if any members of the committee wish to ask, but that'd be my comment.
Thank you, Vice Chair Royce. Very well put together report and comprehensive. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and open it to members of the roundtable for any questions or comments. I see Member Ford has her hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chairperson Hindi and Vice Chairman Royce. I appreciate your remarks and putting on my President of the California Pilots Association hat. I can confirm what you're saying about the speed of how these things are coming. 60 Minutes even had a presentation about 2 months ago about different kinds of new aircraft. So there's urban air mobility with and without pilots flying things around, vehicles around, and there's electric aircraft in Fresno. There's Joseph Oldham is working on a company called Pipistrel, and they have electric aircraft. And so there are huge changes in general aviation that are fast approaching. And you're right, it is going to be faster than we imagine. So, and this area is they're already testing things around here. So I expect we would have a lot more questions and concerns about this in the upcoming months. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ford. Anyone else?
Oops.
Okay, seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and move on to item number 7, which is the SFO Airport Director Report. Doug, are you doing this, or do we have Mr. Sotero with us?
I couldn't make it tonight, Chair Hindi, so I'll cover a couple of updates, then I'll turn it over to Bert for a few items on his end. And I'll start with the status of our passenger traffic. We're continuing to see passenger traffic recovering at SFO. Over the Memorial Day weekend, we saw multiple days where we saw over 60,000 passengers going through our security checkpoint. And that is a new high mark for the pandemic era. Pre-pandemic, those numbers would be 75 to 80,000. But again, we're seeing some of the highest levels of passenger activity since the pandemic began. We finished the month of May at 73% of pre-pandemic levels. And we're expecting to see roughly a similar level of activity throughout the summer. It's really international activity and business travel that continue to lag behind. We saw a few new airlines joining SFO in the month of May. On May 19th, Canadian airline Air Transat launched nonstop flights between SFO and Montreal. They're going to serve SFO with flights twice a week. They're using a Boeing 737. Their flight arrives at 8:30 in the morning, departs at 9:15 a.m. We also had a new German airline Condor start service at SFO the same day, May 19th. They're going to fly 3 times a week to Frankfurt using a Boeing 767. Their flight arrives at 7:15 p.m., leaves at 9:15 p.m. We also had a new U.S. domestic low-cost carrier called Breeze launched last week. They're going to be flying 1 flight a day to various destinations, Richmond, Charleston, or Louisville, using an Airbus A220 aircraft. And all of their arrivals and departures are roughly midday, 11:30 arrival, about a 12:15 to 12:30 departure. And then today, Iberia resumed service at SFO with nonstop flights to Madrid, 3 days a week using an A330. That's a 4:15 p.m. arrival, a 5:50 p.m. departure. In the discussion about advanced aerial mobility, we are actually going to be hosting a conference in August on advanced aerial mobility with Caltrans. I'll forward the link to register to the roundtable body if there's any interest in participating in that. And with that, I'll turn it over to Bert for any updates that he has.
Thanks for the handoff, Doug. Let me go ahead and see if I can share a screen here real quick. Lost the ability to see my share, so let's try that one more time.
There it goes.
All righty, good thing. So for our noise office update, wanted to lead off with our.
Pardon me, Bert. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Are you able to put your presentation in presentation mode so we could see the full screen, please?
All right, are we seeing?
Not yet, but I believe if you see on the bottom right corner, if you click on like the stand, sort of the keynote icon, that should be able to, there we go. Perfect. Thank you very much.
Swap screens. I have 2 screens.
Thank you, Bert.
All right, so here we go. With this one, we're talking about one of our major noise action plan items, which is a shameless plug for going into the August meeting, where we'll be discussing our noise action plan. But this item here is one that the roundtable asked that we track after we were able to convince a few of the airlines to go ahead and join us in doing this. And United was the lead off in doing it, and they're progressing well. But of the 10 carriers that we have, and Doug mentioned the new carriers, you can see Air Transat's number 2 on the list there. They're showing up with a 76%. But the 3 that I really want to toot the horn for is Alaska Airlines, American Airlines, and Hawaiian Airlines. They all have 100% of their fleet with these devices you can see on the right side of the screen there. It's called an airflow deflector. Some people know that we used to call them wake vortex generators. We've had a few people chide us saying that they're actually airflow deflectors. So we changed over our terminology. We have two others in the 90% category. That would be Frontier Airlines at 94%, JetBlue at 92%, which is pretty good for the size fleets they have. So considering that we have most of our carriers in the 90% or better, well, half of our carriers in the 90% or better, 3 at 100%. The program is tracking very well. And we're hoping to have, now that we're through the COVID and getting our flights back, the airlines will be making the retrofits again. So continue to track it on our website. The email address, the web page is there for you, and we'll provide that. Our night hush departures, the night hush was implemented by the FAA on May 19th. The noise office has been tracking these and will continue to track those. We have a report that we shared with the Roundtable. Oh gosh, I'm thinking this was 9 months ago. And anyway, this report was liked by the Roundtable. Staff, of course, couldn't let it alone. They wanted to work with it. And I think they did some really good modifications to this. Not huge, but this is the general format of the report that we'll be sharing with you very shortly. We'll be reporting out the monthly, and look forward to sharing these numbers with you. And for our final one, just a quick update on our noise insulation program. The replacement initiative on the left side, we've had total potential eligible properties, 3,959, almost 4,000. And total applications received, 940. We have currently 130 in the design phase, 45 in construction. Total units have been completed in this phase, 19. The satisfaction rate's gone up, which is good for us to see. We had a problem with this one being lower, and we're not pleased with that. So we went and made some changes to the program and got some satisfaction improvements. The Second Chance Initiative, for those homes that weren't initially treated, we've identified 434 eligible properties, 623 total applications we've received, 52 in design, 10 in construction, 54 completed, and the satisfaction rate, 97% on these. Again, the webpage link is at the bottom, and I'll go ahead and stop my share and go back to the chair for any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ganong and Mr. Yekel. I don't see any hand, but before I'll let members speak, I want to extend my thanks to American Airlines, Hawaii Airlines, and Alaska Airlines for completing 100% of their airflow deflectors. That is something really encouraging. We know the Airbus, the A320 series has been one of those annoying airplanes coming in during landing. So hopefully we look for the day where we get 100% of all the fleet from all airlines upgraded. Thank you for your reports, both of you. With that, I see a few hands up. I'll go first to Vice Chair Royce.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bert, thank you for that report. I thought that was very interesting. Just a couple of questions on the noise insulation program. Is that limited to communities within the contours, or does it include communities outside the contours? Number one. And number two, I'm understanding there's maybe some federal funds available through grants for those types of programs. Has the airport looked at applying for any of those grants? And if so, what's the status of that? I noticed in the letter we sent to the aviation subcommittee, we made special mention of making sure there are special programs for communities, particularly communities of concern, in which residents may be hard hit by noise more so than others, and be unable to effectively deal with that as well as others might. And I'm interested in making sure that we have programs for them in particular. Not articulating that particularly well, but I think you get my point.
Yes, sir. The answer to both your questions is yes. So SFO is very involved with the programs. They are within the noise contour or the contiguous contour. Some places it bounces out just a hair. And the second question is grants. Wouldn't be able to do it without the grants. It's a great program to be able to take advantage of. And we are.
I'm sorry, Bert, I didn't hear the second part of that on the grants. I didn't hear what you said.
The first part was yes, has to be within inside the noise contours, and it can be within a contiguous contour, meaning it goes to the end of a street or a natural landmark boundary.
Okay, and did you say you were applying for federal grants or what funds?
Yes, sir. We wouldn't be able to do the program
could
without.
even be expanded. Is that what you said?
We would not be able to do the program without the grants.
Okay.
He said
thank you.
he wouldn't be able to do the program without the grant.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with my connectivity here.
That's
Well,
okay.
So
Let me
I'd be
follow up.
happy to put a headset on.
Let me follow up on that a little bit, Bert. So is there any program, federal, state, or any otherwise, that could expand the territory of the installation?
Not that we're aware of. The programs are explicitly governed by the FAA's Part 150, and they're very specific on how those programs are done.
Regardless of the source of funds?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next, I see Member Schneider.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Bert. I would love to get a copy of your slides. So, pardon me, so that I can share them with my city manager and for the meetings Millbrae will be hosting. On the insulation programs and the second chance program, do you think there is any way you could add which cities those homes are in? In a perfect world, I'd get to see them in a map and how they fall within the contours, but I'm guessing that might be a privacy issue. But just breaking out that these insulation programs right now are predominantly, but please correct me, San Bruno and South San Francisco, correct?
San Bruno, South San Francisco. I think we have a few in Daly City.
It would be helpful to point those out, and that they are tied to the current way the FAA attributes noise. So until we get the FAA to recognize other noise types, we're not within the contours. And reverse flow are completely not included in the contours because the data is averaged out over 365 days.
You're correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, Member Diego.
Oh, thank you, Chair Hindi. My question was for Mr. Yekel. I was so very glad to hear that the airport passenger count is roughly 3/4 of what it was before the pandemic. And, you know, many cities on the peninsula, as far as budget, live and die on the hospitality industry. So do you have any more information on when you say the international lags behind? Do you have a percentage for that compared to pre-pandemic?
I probably have to pull some more data to really paint a data-driven picture, but from a geographical perspective, a lot of it has to do with the parts of the world that have reopened. And Europe is really leading that charge, relaxing restrictions for foreigners to enter their country, making it very easy for vaccinated travelers to come and go. This has really opened up Europe and made it probably the most accessible foreign market for this summer. What remains fairly locked up is Asia, which is obviously our biggest international market. A lot of restrictions still in place there. We've got some limited service, but for example, our biggest Asian market is Hong Kong, and right now we have 0 flights to Hong Kong. Mainland China, 0 flights to mainland China because of those restrictions. And so that's really the element that we need to see recovering, and it probably won't happen this year.
Not this year. Wow. Okay. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you. Next, Member Ortiz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just a quick comment. I'm just really happy to see night hush implemented. I think sometimes we get frustrated with the pace of what we do with this organization, this body, and I think that is an accomplishment that we should all celebrate. And so I'm very happy to see it. Look at those blue tracks, and I get all warm and fuzzy. So thank you, Bert, for that, and thank you everyone who helped put that together.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Member Ortiz. You had a lot to do with that. I know you worked very hard on it, so we appreciate you and everyone else who participated. Okay, Member Taylor.
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation. Just a quick question. How can we expand the contour area to cover areas that are impacted that are not covered currently?
Probably don't want to expand it. That means louder aircraft operating at the airport.
Does that answer your question, Ms. Taylor?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, Member Carver.
Perhaps you'll be covering it in a later agenda item, but you talked about the Airbus 320 air deflectors. Some airlines have a 90%, 100%. Some others, United, were at lower end. Are there programs or a timeline that would require the airflow deflectors?
No, sir, it's a voluntary program. We've asked the airlines to do this. Initially, they all said no. And we were pleased to get 2 airlines initially that were considering it. One of them ended up making the run and going for it, which was United. We kept pressing the other airlines as well as other airports in the United States and Canada. And we found that through the pressure of the public and groups like the Roundtable, yourselves, we were able to get them to go ahead and do it.
Is there an anticipation of, even though it's voluntary, of when we might get to a percentage participation like some of the airlines you noted? Alaska Airlines is one.
I'm sorry, I'm missing.
Do you anticipate a greater uptake in that?
I definitely do. Some of the airlines are getting there quickly by selling the aircraft. And then they would obviously go out in the desert, or the lease is over and they may go to another airline, and the other airline might be willing to do the retrofit. All of the newer ones produced since 2014 come equipped. And so that's nice. Anybody updating their fleet these days with the NEOs, they're going to be equipped.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't see any more hands. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and move on to item number 8, subcommittee updates. First, we have the legislative subcommittee with Vice Chair Royce. Please proceed with the update if you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The legislative subcommittee met a week ago on May 25th. We had 3 members, all of whom were present, including myself, Member Schneider, and Member Di Giovanni. We had a very good meeting. Our topics, we had 2 hours, and we tried to cover about 4 basic topics. There were no recommendations per se that came out of it, but we're trying to set the stage for recommendations for later this fall when we meet again. The 4 topics we covered included an update on pending or current legislation. And basically, there's very little new legislation dealing with noise. And that's because I think most people are waiting for next summer when the big battle will take place on the FAA reauthorization on funding. And so the comment period is open for that, and where we will be given some thought as to what we might want to say around that. There is still legislation with respect from last year and carry forward, very good legislation, but it's not anticipated to go anywhere. The legislation that has been submitted to date has primarily dealt with the unmanned aircraft and some matters like that. But with respect to anything that we want to opine on, other than comments for the FAA reauthorization, there's nothing that came out of our committee. And that was presented by the NOISE representative, Emily Trenter. We also spent some time talking about what might be coming down the road. And we chatted about that a bit earlier when we talked about the UC Davis Symposium. Two things in particular we wanted to give some discussion to: air taxis and the unmanned aircraft and air mobility. And we spent a fair amount of time trying to understand the scope and what the issues might be that came out of it, both pros and cons in terms of why we would do it and why do you have the unmanned aircraft. One fact that sort of struck me, by the way, I didn't mention earlier, was I think it was the Uber spinoff, and I forget the name of it. Is it Joby?
Yeah.
We had a presentation from that gentleman at the symposium that talked about, and Mr. Chairman might remember this, talked about production starting in 2023, and they believe commercialization for the LA area would start in 2024. So when we talk about it not being far off, these heliports and all the infrastructure and some of the issues with respect to where they can fly and not fly, and who has authority over it, again, that may be quicker than we think. But we try to provide some input on that. We had a great presentation by Tim Middleton of our consultants, and we do have the slides. So if any of you are interested in looking at the slides and getting a better handle on exactly what's going on with air taxis and unmanned air mobility, I would be happy to, I'm sure the staff would be happy to forward those slides to you. We were going to talk about supersonics because there's been a fair amount of discussion of what's going on with that. Time did not permit, so we had to defer the discussion on that. We talked a bit about alternative noise metrics, and we went through some of the different metrics that we ought to be considering, and we've chatted about those in the past. There is also a slide presentation that was presented by our consultant as well. And we do have those slides. Jean Riddell presented those, and we can forward those to you as well. But no recommendations came out of the committee with respect to it. We spent some time on talking about the health aspects of aviation noise. And there was a fairly detailed discussion at the aviation symposium on this. And we want to understand, are we doing enough to use that as an advocacy point when we talk about the consequences of noise? And is it well enough understood? There's been a number of studies recently quantifying the impact on cardiovascular disease, on stroke, on mental illness. So you actually have some harder numbers with respect to those citizens exposed, those residents exposed to aviation noise, what it might mean, and whether some of the alternate metrics ought to be used to sort of deal with that. So we spent some time on that. I think one of the a couple of recommendations came out of it. One was perhaps we ought to do a better effort of collaborating with some of the nonprofits, American Heart Association, for example, on the health impacts of noise, aviation noise in particular. Now, again, we're trying to put this in perspective. So it's not like we're against aviation, but we're trying to understand the consequences of it and what it means to our residents. And that would translate into flight procedures and flight paths. And so we looked at it from that perspective. We were going to talk about Title 21, particularly the land use aspects of it. We never got to. Time did not permit. That will be on the agenda for the next meeting. But particularly with unmanned aircraft, I think the ability of communities to control their land use policies, particularly heliports, may be of great significance if this committee, if the roundtable has authority dealing with unmanned aircraft, and that's an open question, I think. And I think those are the topics that we talked about. We really sort of set the stage for the next meeting with respect to what we ought to be working on in terms of actions. So we had no actions, no recommendations that came out of the meeting. It was a very robust meeting, covered quite a bit, and we sort of set the stage. But candidly, we sort of ran out of time to do the kind of discussion that we had hoped to on a couple items. But I'd be happy to entertain questions, or if Ann or Pam would like to add anything. Since they were both members and both there, I'd open the floor to them if you could, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair, for your very thorough report. And I see your colleagues on the subcommittee hands up. I see Member Ford and then Member Schneider.
Thank you. Vice Chairman Royce, I would love to see your slides. And I just wanted to add that Toyota has, I'm pretty sure it's Toyota and Joby, and have a big multi-million dollar investment in exploring what they're doing in a marina Airport in Monterey. It used to be Fort Ord, and they have been whatever you call it, in experimenting or working on their product for years there. And it is a very big deal. So I think you're correct that we're going to hear a lot more about it soon.
Okay, thank you. Member Schneider.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say a huge thank you to LegCom Chair, Member Royce. Great meeting. Thank you for bringing things that came from the UC Davis Aviation. And I also a big thanks to Brian Perkins, who was very active in last week's discussion of what may happen in Washington, depending on the election outcomes in November on that. So who controls the House to a major degree has a big impact on what we may be able to do in the future on that. So it's something for all of us to be watching. And I'm trying to stay nonpartisan on that, but it's going to have a big impact, what happens in November.
Okay, thank you. I think I see Member Giovanni on the phone. Is that the number ending 811?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just want to say thank you to our Ledge Chair and the committee, Brian Perkins as well, and going down, and we're really going to be concentrating on the new type of aircraft that's going to be coming down the pipeline, which might be very concerning of us for all of us on the SFO roundtable, respectively, and very robust, and looking forward to the next meeting and seeing how we can continue this. Thanks to everyone that participated. Thank you. Thank you, Member Schneider, as well. Thank you.
Thank you,
Chair.
Thank you. You're welcome. Member Dugan.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I just want to give a quick shout out to Joby Aviation, who, besides their headquarters down in Monterey, they have a significant development center here in San Carlos, employing about 50 people. So this new generation of aviation can have economic impacts all around San Mateo County as well. And we're glad to have them in San Carlos. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So while we are on the topic, so I would encourage the roundtable members, once we get the invitation from the SFO on urban air mobility, to attend, because definitely this is something that will be interesting to see how it will impact us and what can we do. As I had mentioned earlier, from what we learned in the symposium, that local municipalities will have the ability to have ordinances to regulate where they could be, where the pads, if you will it be, or where they could fly. And there are certain things. So there's a lot to learn about it, but I definitely echo Vice Chair Royce's comment that this will be coming rather sooner than later. So it's up and coming. Keep an eye and get information if you can. I'm looking forward to the invitation from SFO to attend. Thank you again, Vice Chair Royce. I don't see any hands up, so I'm going to go ahead and move on to the ground-based noise subcommittee with Member Schneider as a chair with her report. You're muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Chair. Ground-based noise does not meet between the April and the June meetings, but I would say that we have a July meeting. So if there are people out there, members of the public, members of the roundtable, or staff that have an agenda item, Ms. Montez keeps us on a tight ship. So I think, Angela, when do we need to get those agenda items in? I think it's within the next 2 weeks so that we can get that agenda out, if you could do that. I would say that we are, from a ground-based noise perspective, awaiting SFO Noise Group's new director's report that will begin to show a little bit of low frequency noise or A-weighted noise or C-weighted, breaking out the noise area so that we can see what is more reflective of the closed-in communities. Planning the agenda right now for July, which goes back to member Taylor's comment. If you look specifically at the forms and the types of low frequency noise or ground-based noise, would a noise report look different? Would the contours look different? If we looked at reverse flow flights, would the contours look different? And what those contours might look like at that time. I guess I kind of disagree with when staff member Bert said that that means that the planes are being louder. I think it's more that if we looked at not just every time a plane takes off, but the number of planes that take off and the duration of that noise experience, that gives you a different noise experience than simply saying there were 8 exceedances of a particular noise level on that. I think the big question for the roundtable, we've talked about it at the last ground-based noise, is a deep dive into the ANEEM, ANEEM noise reporting structure, and where does that best fit? We can do it at ground-based noise. We do get a couple of FAA people on occasion, but the working group would probably be the better place to start looking at that new set of measurements on there, or that it becomes something that we talk about at all 3 subcommittee levels. And I think also Ms. Tranter from the entity noise is going to be helping us identify other airports, other roundtables that may be working on low frequency, closed-in community noise. So I thank you, Ms. Tranter, for that. That came from the LegCom meeting last week. And finally, there is a group in Burlingame, Hillsborough, and Millbrae that have been trying to fight their own battle on noise experiences. They sent us an update. I have asked them if they would like to present at the ground-based noise meeting in July. Basically, they got disappointing news on trying to fight the noise experience for the close-in community. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. Anyone has any comments or question on the ground-based noise report from Chair Schneider?
Chair Hindi, I just wanted to comment on Chair Schneider for the GBN meeting that's coming up. It will likely be in the 2nd or 3rd week of July. So we do have some time for that agenda.
Thank you very much, Ms. Montes, for that information. Okay, I see none. I'm gonna go ahead and open the floor for the public to speak on any item in the presentation, which is item 6 through 8.
Thank you, Chairman. As a reminder, if you are calling by phone, you may press *9 to indicate your desire to speak. And at the moment, I do see 2 hands raised. So I will first share my screen for the timer, and then I will call on public member Jennifer, followed by Mark Scholl. Jennifer?
Hi, thank you. Good evening, members of the Roundtable, FAA, and from the office, the congressional offices. I apologize because I haven't been able to be here for the entire meeting, and then I had connectivity problems trying to call in for items not on the agenda, but the item that I want to speak to is related to the Legislative Committee. I want to thank Chair L. Royce for having mentioned, and I don't know if this came up in the meeting today, possibly researching, as you may know, for a few years now, I've been commenting that the roundtable does not engage the public that stands to be affected by the actions that the roundtable discusses. And it's largely an internal discussion with the FAA. And on the FAA side, there are ways where their discussions are insular. In particular, I believe, as regards the NEPA decisions. And so I wanted to raise that again, and I hope that maybe the roundtable will research this issue. And now speaking on behalf of Sky Posse Palo Alto, we have prepared a report which is about the role of local officials in the FAA's environmental reviews. and I will send you a copy as soon as that is published. And I would propose that I hope you could possibly use this as a starter for researching the issues as regards actual public engagement and notification and various issues that are just a tremendous concern for the communities that are not represented by the roundtable and are basically disenfranchised in this process, and regarding the National Environmental Policy Act commitments that the FAA has. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I will next call on Mark Schull.
Hi, thanks. Just a quick comment on Night Hush. I think we all want to use the Bay more, and certainly folks want to have Night Hush operating all day long rather than just, in the middle of the night. And I think there's one initiative that's currently on the NAC agenda, which is a system called MARS, which stands for Multiple Airport Route Separation. What it essentially does is it coordinates reduced separation between airports. This is based on current technologies used for close separation between adjacent runways, and would essentially extend this close separation between adjacent airports. And one of the proposed trial locations is between San Francisco and Oakland, but only for arrivals onto the 19th. But it's something that I think if had more priority and pushed more, is the technology necessary and the system necessary to enable essentially the Night Hush procedure to operate 24 hours a day, as well as make much better use of the Bay as between Oakland and San Francisco airspace for both arrivals and departures. So I think it's something that this body and the congressional representatives should pay attention to. Again, it's MARS, Multiple Airport Route Separation System. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schull. And with that, Chairman, we do not have any more hands raised for presentation items, but I did want to note that we received a written public comment that was addressed to item 8B, and I did circulate that to the membership as well as Chairperson Schneider, and that was from public member Debbie Joyce. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Montes. Before moving to the next item, let me again thank the chairs of the subcommittee, Chair Royce and Chair Schneider, and also the members of the committee for their participation. Appreciate all your work and effort. With that, I'm going to go ahead and move on to item number 9, which is an informational presentation only on the update to the SFO procedure. The San Francisco Roundtable will not be taking any action on this item, nor making any recommendations on the SFO procedure. As you might know, the Select Committee on South Bay Arrivals had submitted its recommendation to the congressional representative back in 2016, after numerous hours of discussion and research. Supervisor Simitian, chair of the committee, members of the committee, and community members, as well as the FAA, were all present for those discussions. This item really is a little unusual, as it is not in our normal course of business. As you know, the Roundtable recently went through a very comprehensive process to evaluate whether we could accommodate communities outside San Mateo County. A majority of members voted against expansion, in part because we do not have the resources to address the impacts of aviation noise on communities far outside the airport. In fact, the draft work plan we just approved deprioritizes SFO and other procedures that do not impact our members. But we greatly appreciate our partnership with the FAA, and the FAA had requested an opportunity to deliver this presentation. We are happy to provide this opportunity. And with us today, moderating for the FAA is Alana Jarris, FAA Community Engagement Officer, and Tamara Swan, Acting Western Regional Administrator. But before I go to the FAA, let me turn it over to the SFO, and I believe Mr. Yackel has a few words.
Thank you, Chair Hindi. Appreciate it. And just wanted to kind of recognize this as in our minds, this is kind of an example of why we look at the roundtable as kind of the place where information can be exchanged, where comments can be made, where information can be disseminated. We understand, we appreciate some of the other comments that have been made throughout the course of the night, and we continue to see the roundtable as that place where information is gathered, is disseminated, and with that, I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Doug. And let me go ahead without any further delay, pass it on to the FAA, and with us again, the FAA Community Engagement Officer, Ms. Jarris.
Hey, good evening, everyone. My name is Alana Jarris Chirhindi. Thank you for the introduction. I'm the FAA CEO for the Western Service Center. Tonight, we're going to have panelists here to answer some pre-submitted questions, and we'll also be providing information on the current status of the amended SURFR procedure. So for the agenda tonight, I'll just kind of walk through quickly what we're going to be doing. We're going to start with some opening remarks from Tamara Swan, and then she's going to give a little bit of background of the situation and why we're here tonight. And then we'll go through the questions and answers and then end with some closing remarks. But before I do that, I just wanted to introduce the FAA panelists tonight. So I'll give you their names and titles and organizations. We have Tamara Swan, the acting Western Pacific Regional Administrator, Favi Garcia, who's the acting Deputy Regional Administrator, Melissa Holmes, the Assistant General Manager for the Oakland Air Traffic District, Joe Burt, the Team Manager from the Western Service Center, and Lori Sutmeyer, the Manager of San Francisco Airport District's Office. Now I'll hand it over to Tamara for some opening remarks.
Alana, I apologize if you passed it to me. My connection is unstable at this point.
Tamara, I do believe Alana passed it to you.
Hindi, for allowing us time here tonight to address communities that still have questions regarding the SURFR procedure. Tonight, as Alana mentioned, we're answering questions from the community members that the FAA recently received regarding the SURFR procedure. And the purpose of tonight's presentation is to follow up on the Northern California workshops that we held last year in July. The history and background information can be found on the NorCal workshop page, which is on the FAA website, and the videos can be streamed on YouTube. These links will be provided at the end of this briefing tonight. Within Northern California, many airports, congested airspace, and landscape terrain present unique challenges and constraints. We want to acknowledge the ongoing noise concerns that have been shared with the FAA over the past several years. We've worked diligently for years to meet the Select Committee's request, starting with engagement in 2016. We remained committed to collaborating with the Select Committee and Roundtable on these concerns throughout the modernization process. We've worked for years to meet the full intent of the Select Committee. Even though we couldn't reach a consensus solution, we continue to remain open to suggestions on enhanced outreach and improved communications through the proper adjudicating bodies, the FAA Noise Portal, and coordination with our stakeholders. We appreciate the opportunity afforded by the San Francisco Roundtable this evening to use this forum to address the remaining questions, as this roundtable is what we believe the most appropriate venue for all of us to work together and the place for communities impacted by San Francisco operations to bring their recommendations for future consideration. We also recognize that many frustrations remain regarding the SURFR procedure. I want to reiterate that the FAA takes community recommendations and the intent of these requests into consideration. I want to thank those of you who have provided comments or have given input. As discussed here at the roundtable meetings and in our July workshops of last year, the FAA remains open to a consensus-backed recommendation on this procedure. In the absence of that, and the spirit of transparency, I want to be clear. The agency does not have any plans or actions for the amended SURFR procedure. Therefore, as a result, we will be closing this procedure in the gateway. The Instrument Flight Procedures, also known as the IFP Gateway, is a portal to track upcoming procedural changes. Since we will not be implementing the amended SURFR, we need to take this administrative action to close this item out. In the future, our focus is on moving forward, building on our collaboration with stakeholders and engagement with communities as we seek an innovative San Francisco Roundtable should they submit a new consensus request. Alana?
All right, thank you, Tamara. We'll go ahead and move on to the first question. Okay, I'm just gonna go ahead and read each question that we received, and then I'll call on the respective panelists to answer. So the first question we have here is, what forces have been applied to make the FAA change its opinion and disregard our congressional representatives and the select committee report? Tamara, can you please take that one?
Thanks, Alana. The final design represents the FAA's very best effort, given the constraints and challenges of the airspace in Northern California that I mentioned in my opening remarks. The FAA has expended significant resources in the order of thousands of hours since 2016 to address the select committee recommendations and community outreach, and provide an update on key recommendations. As I mentioned earlier, we held community engagement workshops in July of last year on the 20th and 21st, which addressed community concerns, including SURFR. Communities supported returning to the former Big Sur flight track. Of course, you can imagine, by contrast, the communities under the former Big Sur flight track strongly opposed to returning to that former route. Despite our very best effort and investment of significant resources, the constraints and challenges posed by the Northern California airspace, and that designing procedures to our safety criteria didn't allow for a procedure design that met every required element of the select committee's recommendations. We don't have any alternative options to offer to meet all of the select committee's requirements.
Thank you, Tamara. Moving on to question 2. What needs to be done to put the FAA back on course to convert SURFR into the BSR overlay? Tamara, could you take that one as well?
Yes. Our position today, keeping the current SURFR, is based on our respect for how much time and effort the select committee and the communities dedicated to arriving at every element of the SURFR recommendation in the select committee report. Moving forward, as I mentioned, as design criteria and technologies change, we welcome opportunities to explore options to reduce noise to the greatest extent possible. We'll continue to work with the airports and community roundtables should they submit a new consensus recommendation.
Thank you. Number 3, how does our community work with the FAA if we have no select committee and no roundtable to work through? Favi, can you take this one?
Yes, thank you, Alana. The FAA has recognized that our outreach and engagement on earlier airspace projects was not sufficient, and we have adjusted how we engage. As many of you are aware, we are present at all roundtables, and when asked, we provide technical briefings or updates, among things. The FAA has committed our most valuable asset, our people, to this process. Moving forward, we are making sure that stakeholders are in the conversation early. Prior to any formal recommendation, it is important that all entities with a role or responsibility are part of the development of that recommendation. Our current engagement strategy includes working with airports and community leadership through roundtables, ad hoc committees, task forces, and noise forums. Community engagement officers work with these entities to bring community perspectives into the discussions at the FAA. We also have the Noise Complaint Initiative, where citizens can submit their questions, comments, and complaints. We want to acknowledge that we have received community input and inquiries from individuals within the boundaries of the San Francisco International Airport, many of which have received a response, and all will continue, and will continue to respond as they are received through the portal. Thank you.
Thanks, Swati. Number 4, FAA implemented NextGen, which has inflicted noise upon Santa Cruz County residents. We are over 50 nautical miles away from SFO. Therefore, we have no financial benefit from SFO airport operations, such as double pane windows. What is FAA willing to offer to mitigate this harm on our health and well-being? Lori, can you please answer that one?
Certainly. The FAA provides mitigation for significant impacts identified as likely to occur as a result of an FAA major federal action pursuant to the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, and FAA's NEPA implementing procedures within the CNEL, which is the Community Noise Exposure Level, 65 decibel contour, or stated another way, where the noise exposures for homes exceeds 65 decibels. Alana?
Thank you, Lori. Going on to question 5. What measures can the FAA take to address arrival noise and environmental impacts in short order, less than 1 year? An idle descent, EID, should be the default called for by the FAA. Melissa, can you please take that one?
Yeah, I'd be happy to, Alana. So next-gen procedures, which include the Northern California Metroplex procedures, are all designed as optimum profile descent procedures, or OPDs, which means that these procedures are designed for aircraft to be at idle power throughout their descent, from the top of their descent to the runway. The default for the next-gen procedures is for them to be OPDs, or as indicated in the question, engine idle descents. Now, there are times when controllers cannot allow an aircraft to descend at idle power for their whole descent. Some reasons for this are traffic conflictions, weather, or restrictions at the airport. If a controller needs to take action for one of these reasons, they could stop the descent or issue a vector. But once that issue has been resolved, the goal is to put the aircraft back in an idle power descent if at all possible.
Thanks, Melissa. The next question, during the select committee process, FAA representatives stated that a BSR overlay would be quieter than SURFR ever could be. The SURFR procedure has generated well over 6 million noise reports since implementation. At times, flights are no more than 1 minute apart. SFO has no flight curfew, unlike SJC. Flights can arrive as late as 1 a.m. or as early as 4 a.m., disturbing sleep. Flights can sometimes come in below 10K and apply speed brakes and then accelerate. This is not how next-gen procedures are supposed to be flown. So the questions are, who is at fault here? Air traffic control, pilots, or is this procedure inherently flawed and needs to be redesigned? And how is the FAA moving forward to correct this problem? Melissa, can you take this one as well?
Yeah, thanks, Alana. So first, I want to say that the number of flights and the time of day of those flights is not controlled by the FAA. The airlines determine their schedule based on market demand. So the first question, who is at fault? No one is at fault. One reason air traffic controllers would take flights off the OPD is airspace congestion, which is caused by the number of flights and the flight schedule, which is determined by each carrier and is driven by market demand. About the procedures being inherently flawed, they are not flawed. They're designed to be flown at an idle power descent, which is the most optimal from both a pilot and controller perspective. Each OPD is procedurally separated from other OPDs. So the safest action for controllers is to leave the aircraft on the optimum profile descent. Only when there are other factors like traffic or weather or airport restrictions would controllers take any kind of action, which they would do to ensure the safety of that flight and the safety of the larger national airspace system. So in the last bullet, there is nothing to correct. These procedures are more efficient with more opportunities for idle power descents than legacy procedures. I, like most people on here, live in the Bay Area, And I do hear the flights going over my house very regularly. I know it's frustrating, but it's not unsafe, and there's nothing wrong or nothing that needs to be corrected.
Thank you, Melissa. Moving on to the next question. Can you give us 3 impactful changes that communities have asked for that the FAA has done willingly for Metroplex projects within the Western Pacific region? Joe and Melissa, I think you probably have some examples that we could share.
Yes, Alana, thank you. I have a few that I'll share, and then I think I'll kick it to Melissa and she can share a couple that she has. First one I have is Oakland 5 out of Oakland. We're changing the initial departure heading to move it away from the shoreline. And that was an Oakland round or noise forum request. Another one is what we talked about here, you guys have mentioned as well, is the night hush. We've implemented that since May 19th. We worked very hard to make that happen. And then the last one I can bring up is the Woodside VOR. There was a request to maintain at or above 8,000 feet crossing that. We have since implemented that and then put in a procedure that complies with that as well. With that, I'll turn it over to Melissa for hers.
Thanks, Joe. And I have some that maybe are not quite as well known as what Joe talked about. So we also redesigned the San Francisco Class Bravo airspace to allow for continuous descents on the Surfer and Diamond arrivals. So this was both a safety issue for air traffic and a community request, because before the redesign, aircraft were leveling off, and after they were able to make that continuous descent. For our air traffic controllers at Northern California TRACON, we added a requirement that they use the down the bay procedure to keep aircraft over the bay to the maximum extent possible. And we published that requirement in their noise abatement standard operating procedures. We also retrained all Northern California TRACON controllers on the San Francisco nighttime noise abatement procedures, including the use of runway 28 right. So hopefully these examples show that we do want to work with communities to find options to address their concerns. Unfortunately, flying over no one is not an option in the heavily populated Bay Area. Our goal is to take into account everything that we're hearing, which can include input from many communities, and develop the safest and most efficient procedures we can.
Thank you, Joe and Melissa. The next question we have is, if we are to attempt, to work with the FAA in the future, what assurances can be given that the agency will negotiate in good faith, be transparent, and willing to make changes that don't always benefit their stakeholders, but do benefit those of us currently paying the price for next gen? Tamara, can you please take this one?
Of course, Alana, thank you. We understand the frustration, but I want to point out that we're here to answer questions and address concerns. When changes aren't made, it doesn't mean we're not listening and that these points aren't considered. We're working to understand the concerns, and we move forward to explore the acceptability of the ideas presented. Early communication about the feasibility of or a recommendation of a slight change to a procedure doesn't mean immediate and quick answers or even quick application. We are being transparent about our processes and continuously review consensus recommendations. We routinely work with airports and roundtables where we provide informational briefings and updates. We participate in every roundtable throughout our region.
Thanks, Tamara. Next question is, why won't the FAA limit arrival rates to increase fuel economy and reduce noise when there are such strong environmental and health impacts associated with ignoring these issues? I think Lori and Melissa address this one, please.
Certainly. FAA does not generally have the authority to implement noise and access restrictions. However, 14 CFR Part 161, that's the Code of Federal Regulations, describes the methods by which an airport operator may implement noise and access restrictions. A noise or access restriction may be effective only if the restriction has been agreed to by the airport sponsor, which is the owner or operator of the airport, all current aircraft operators that would be affected by the restriction, and all aircraft operators that will be affected by the restriction and will be serving the airport within 180 days of the proposed restriction. Additionally, a proponent may seek approval for a noise or access restriction per subpart D of 14 CFR Part 161, which is a study. The Part 161 study must demonstrate a number of goals. The first is the restriction is reasonable, not arbitrary, and non-discriminatory. Second, the restriction does not create an undue burden on interstate or foreign commerce. Third, the proposed restriction maintains safe and efficient use of navigable airspace. Fourth, the proposed restriction does not conflict with any existing federal statute or regulation. Fifth, the applicant has provided adequate opportunity for public comment on the proposed restriction. And sixth, the proposed restriction does not create an undue burden on the national aviation system. One moment. Of note, 21 airport sponsors have undertaken Part 161 studies, and to date, none of them have met the conditions described above. So this is a tall order to be able to, you can conduct the study, but it's very difficult to achieve all of these 6 items above. Melissa?
Thanks, Lori. I just wanted to add that from an air traffic perspective, the optimum profile descents that we already have in place increase fuel economy and reduce noise as compared with legacy procedures. In air traffic, we do our best to leave aircraft on the optimum profile descents whenever possible and just take them off when safety dictates it. Thanks, Alana.
All right, the next question is, we know the old BSR was safe as there were never any accidents. How much faster is Surfer to the terminal than the old BSR, and how much safer is it? Melissa, can you take this one, please?
Sure, thanks, Alana. So first I want to say that the Big Sur is a stair-step procedure, and it's not procedurally separated or built in a separated way from Bay Area departures, from San Jose arrivals, or from military airspace. So because of that, controllers had to manually separate Big Sur arrivals from other aircraft, which was very workload intensive. The Surfer, on the other hand, is procedurally separated from other routes, and that's improved the safety and efficiency both in the cockpit and at the radar scope. In terms of how much faster it is, the real efficiency that we see comes from not having to manually stair-step aircraft through their descents and not having to vector them as much. So when we can avoid doing those things, aircraft get to the airport much faster.
Thanks, Melissa. For the next question, how do you justify not returning to the old BSR ground track when you can't meet the criteria for next gen? Tamara, will you answer this one, please?
Yes, Alana. We've discussed why we're not going to proceed with the amended Surfer, and that's because we couldn't meet the points that were called out in the recommendation. It's important to clarify that the elements of the recommendation are not the technical or safety criteria that we use when designing a procedure. The current Surfer procedure was designed following FAA technical and safety criteria.
Thanks, Tamara. The next question is, prior to the BSR move to Surfer, were there complaints from air traffic control regarding workload from this specific procedure? Has Surfer lightened ATC workload, or has it remained the same or worsened? Melissa, can you take this one, please?
Yeah, Alana. So at one point in time, we had a charting error where we had to turn off the Surfer for a couple of months. And during that time, we did route aircraft via the Big Sur. During that time period, we did get dozens of complaints from controllers about the workload. the controllers had to issue multiple descent clearances to every aircraft on the Big Sur because it is a stair-step procedure. And every altitude assignment is different because the Big Sur is not separated from other traffic the way the Surfer is. So each situation has to be handled individually for aircraft on the Big Sur. Also, aircraft on the Big Sur are more likely to need to be vectored, which results in multiple control instructions being issued by controllers to aircraft. The Surfer did significantly reduce the workload, both with traffic conflicts and altitude assignments for controllers.
Thanks, Melissa. The next question, when there were issues with the Surfer procedure, the FAA returned flights to the BSR procedure. BSR has not been retired and remains active. Was the FAA allowing aircraft to fly an unsafe procedure? And if BSR is a safe procedure, why can't this procedure be flown today instead of the current Surfer, which is still problematic, noisy, requires speed braking, is unhealthy for communities it flies over, and requires bricks to continuously fly under the altitude as described in the 2021 workshop by the FAA? Tamara and Melissa, can you take this two-part question, please?
Sure, Alana. I'll start and then I'll hand it off to Melissa. I think I first want to emphasize that the Big Sur was safe, but we continually evaluate procedures nationwide to see if we can make our system even safer and more efficient. I want to stress that improving safety doesn't mean what was done earlier wasn't safe. This is exactly what we mean when we say we're consistently looking to improve safety and efficiency. Melissa?
Thanks, Tamara. So the Big Sur is still active, and it's in place for aircraft that don't have the equipment to fly the Surfer, which is very few flights. So any aircraft that flies the Big Sur today would be a lower priority than aircraft on the Surfer because, as I explained earlier, Big Sur aircraft are in conflict with other traffic around them. When we're talking about the Big Sur, we also need to consider the bigger picture for all of the NorCal procedures. All the procedures were designed to work together safely and to create efficiencies across Northern California. We can't start using the Big Sur without a significant impact to the rest of the traffic in and out of the Bay Area, because the traffic on the Big Sur would no longer be separated from other routes, like it is on the Surfer now. And it would also not have the same efficiencies that the Surfer has. So if we went back to the Big Sur, it would actually create a ripple effect across multiple routes in the Bay Area.
Thank you both. Next question is, when Glenn Martin, who's a former Western Pacific Regional Administrator, stated that the Surfer had been targeted for a higher level of optimization as opposed to other SFO procedures, what exactly was he referring to? Tamara, can you please answer this one?
I will. I can only say I'm unaware in what context Glenn may have made that statement. However, as we've stated, all of the redesigned procedures during this period were optimized for safety and efficiency.
Thanks, Tamara. Next question is, from recent surveys and studies, it has been shown that overflights affect people on the ground much more than what the FAA previously thought. Is the FAA looking into reducing noise along with maximizing fuel efficiency? Tamara and Melissa, can you take that?
I will, and then I'll hand it to Melissa. The NAS, the National Airspace System, is a resource. When we talk about efficiency, we're talking about the most efficient use of that, what is limited space. If there are fuel reductions in those efficiencies, that's a benefit to all of us because it means reductions in emissions. The FAA doesn't prioritize fuel reduction over community concerns. We consider all elements. We follow our environmental regulations through NEPA, and we balance the needs and constraints of the system. Melissa?
Thanks, Tamara. And from an air traffic perspective, yes, we do take community feedback, and we do look at ways to reduce noise. So today, several people have talked about the night hush procedures. In air traffic, we did the analysis to determine when and how we could reduce noise using the night hush procedures in a way that ensured that we were still maximizing safety. You've also heard that we mandate noise abatement procedures for our controllers and train them how to apply those procedures correctly. Thanks, Alana.
You guys, the next question is from noise pollution to health issues. Jet noise is highly impactful. Based on the surveys and studies, when will the FAA begin to prioritize noise and fuel efficiency over maximizing takeoffs and landings? Favi and Melissa, can you answer this one, please?
Yes, thanks, Alana. As Tamara mentioned earlier, the FAA does not prioritize fuel reduction over community concerns. We must take all elements into consideration, follow our environmental regulations through NEPA, and balance the needs of the system. I'm not sure if Melissa had anything else to add.
Sure, I'll add a little bit more, Favi, just from an air traffic perspective. And that is that the primary purpose of our air traffic system is to prevent a collision involving aircraft operating in that system. We also provide a safe, orderly, and expeditious flow of traffic. So the job of an air traffic controller is to provide the highest level of safety to all users of the national airspace system. We don't determine how many aircraft fly in the system, or when they fly or where they're going, or how many times they land or depart. Our job is to make sure they are safe all the time, every time. Once we have procedures in place to provide the highest level of safety, we do look at fuel efficiency and noise. We implement ODPs, we create noise abatement procedures, and we do all of that to the best of our ability while still being mindful that our primary and overriding requirement is for safety of flight. Thanks, Alana.
Thank you both. The next question, how soon will the FAA implement usage of the time-based flow management tool be implemented? Is there any resistance to using this tool? Melissa, could you please address this as well?
Yeah, thanks, Alana. So TBFM, or time-based flow management, has been in use for San Francisco arrivals since at least 2015. So for those who may not be familiar with it, this tool spaces arrivals to San Francisco and is designed so that each air traffic facility along the route must provide some of the spacing required for each aircraft. So when all of the spacing from the different facilities is combined, we have the required spacing that's needed at the runway. So when spacing is needed for arrivals on the surfer, for example, the aircraft will be partially spaced apart from each other, but not completely until they get to the runway. So when aircraft start their approach, air traffic controllers ensure that they have final spacing that's needed on the surfer, and they also blend aircraft on the surfer with aircraft coming from other arrival routes. So there are some other factors also that can affect TBM's accuracy, and that includes adverse weather, increased complexity, go-arounds, and military airspace, to name some of them. So in terms of resistance, there's no resistance to using TBFM. Before COVID, it was being used on a daily basis for arrivals to San Francisco. At our current levels of traffic, it's still used frequently when we have high demand or low ceilings or issues at the airport like runway construction. Thanks, Alana.
Thank you. Next question is, what kinds of accommodations can be made if the FAA isn't going to move the route? Are there any noise mitigations available? Fabi, could you please answer this one?
Yes, thank you. As mentioned earlier, we will look at consensus recommendations from the community. And moving forward, as design criteria and technologies change, the FAA welcomes the opportunities to explore the options to reduce noise to the greatest extent possible. And we will continue to work with the airports and the community roundtables should they submit new consensus recommendations.
Thanks, Fabi. These two questions have to do with braking. Melissa, I think they're going to be for you as well. Can aircraft brake over a heavily populated area or over the freeway instead of over the quiet residential mountains? And the second question for you, Melissa, is can aircraft fly higher and brake later?
Yeah, thanks, Alana. Let me answer the first question to start with. So the SURFR is an optimum profile descent procedure, which is not designed to require braking. Our goal is for all aircraft to stay on their idle power descent until they get to the runway, which would require no braking at all. So doing that provides the highest level of safety because aircraft are automatically separated from each other on these optimum profile descents. It also provides better fuel efficiency and lessens the noise. If an air traffic controller needs to stop an aircraft's descent or vector the aircraft, it's done in response to a specific situation, like a conflict with another aircraft or weather in the vicinity. So an air traffic controller has to take action at that time. They cannot choose whether to take action over a freeway or an unpopulated area, because they have to take action immediately for flight safety. In terms of whether aircraft can they fly higher and brake later, when we design procedures, we take aircraft characteristics into consideration. And one of the reasons we do that is so that the aircraft is in a stable flight path, stable flight profile throughout its flight. That's especially a consideration for us during the approach phase of flight. So optimum profile descents are designed for the aircraft to fly at the best altitude and speed for that flight. We don't want to do anything like require aircraft to fly at a higher altitude or a faster speed that might make the aircraft less stable, because there's more chance of having a go around or additional vectoring if the aircraft is not as stable as it could be. This might also require that we take the aircraft off the optimum profile descent, which then could cause more fuel burn and potentially more noise. Our goal is to have the aircraft fly the safest profile, which is also gives them the best chance of a complete idle power descent.
Looks like this is another one for you, Melissa. Some planes don't fly over houses. Some of them fly over the ocean. Why can't they all fly that route?
Thanks, Alana. So it may not seem like it from the ground, but the airspace over Northern California is actually very congested. There are many routes into and out of the airports in the Bay Area. For example, there are 4 main arrival routes into San Francisco alone. These must be separated from each other until the final approach, and they also must be separated from arrivals to the other airports in the Bay Area. So when you factor in departures, it gets even more complicated. We start lining aircraft up on their specific arrival route more than 100 miles from the airport to create the safest and most efficient flow possible. So if all aircraft flew on one route, there wouldn't be enough room for all of the flights that are going to that airport, and we would end up holding aircraft or taking other significant actions like lots of delay vectoring to get all of the arrivals into the airport. And Alana, I know that we thought we might have a pilot, a captain from United. I don't know if we wanted to invite him to speak to any of this as well.
I don't know if Captain Cook's on the line and he's available to speak, but I'll give it a second to see.
So how long is the captain going to be speaking? Because I need to manage the time as well. Does he have presentation or is he just making a comment?
Oh, I think you're just asking to make a comment. We can move on, Chair Handy, no problem.
No problem. No, he's welcome to come in, but I'm just wanting to understand, is he having a presentation or just a statement?
I think it was just a statement to elaborate on the previous question.
He's more than welcome.
Okay.
All right, Sam, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
All right, good evening, everyone. Yeah, I'm Sean Cook. I'm the Assistant Chief Pilot here in San Francisco for United Airlines. I think Melissa actually read my notes because I had very much written down the same thing that she said for question 19 and 20. The use of speed brakes is very dynamic in the flight. We normally do not plan to use speed brakes. We would plan to do the idle descent on the surfer arrival. We do not plan to use speed brakes over any geographical landmarks. I'm not sure. I don't think there are any approaches that would require us to use a geographical landmark to plan speed brake usage. With that said, just like Melissa said, when our descent profile is changed for either aircraft deconfliction, weather, or airport conditions, speed brakes may be required at that point in time for us to meet any altitude or speed restrictions that ATC has given us. As far as question 20, newer next generation aircraft, they're quieter compared to their predecessors. Requiring the aircraft to remain higher would require them to use additional drag for their descent. This would be accomplished by either speed brakes or actually even lowering the landing gear much earlier than anticipated to increase the drag to get us down back onto profile so that we could have a safe approach into San Francisco. This would definitely increase the noise on the ground. And that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain.
Thank you, Sean. The next question is, some planes lower their altitude, slow down, then speed up. This tells me that they can fly higher and not brake or not speed up. Will the FAA agree to do a study of why that is and make recommendations to the airlines to not do this? What is it? Pilot error, pilot training, airlines trying to save fuel? I think Tamara and Melissa, can you address this, please?
I can, Alana. I feel like this is a perfect follow-on question to Captain Cook and Melissa's comments from the previous questions. I know it may not feel this way, but the community's goals and the goals of the aviation industry are very much aligned on this point. Carriers and controllers want to get aircraft up and out of the airspace and to cruising altitude as quickly and safely as possible. When it comes to arrivals, they want to do the same. Melissa mentioned this earlier. Safe and efficient operations mean that aircraft are more often than not lined up for a smooth and continuous descent, waiting their turn. Melissa, anything to add?
Thanks, Tamara. I'll just add that each specific flight has unique characteristics based on the aircraft's performance capabilities, the weight of the aircraft at that time, the weather conditions, and other factors. So no aircraft is flown exactly the same way on the same route. From an air traffic perspective, we determine what's safe for the aircraft to fly in terms of being separated from other aircraft, meeting restrictions, military airspace, that kind of thing. But it's up to the pilot in command to fly his or her aircraft safely while complying with directions from air traffic control. And if the pilot advises that they can't do that, we'll work with them to make adjustments to their instructions so that they can operate their aircraft safely.
Thank you both. Next question is, we have noise laws on motorcycles, cars, and trains. Why not planes? Will the FAA agree to do a study on the noise levels over our homes? What technology can be mandated that will quiet the planes? Lori, can you please take this one?
I can. So Part 150 studies are conducted by airport operators to assess land use compatibility for the areas surrounding the airport and determine noise exposure for individuals resulting from airport operations. The local airport environs are defined by the community noise equivalent level, or the CNEL, 65 decibel noise contour. The City and County of San Francisco completed its last Part 150 update, comprising a noise compatibility program and noise exposure maps in April of 2019, with the FAA's issuance of a record of approval, an ROA. The ROA authorized continuation of acoustical treatment of eligible residential properties within the CNEL 65 decibel and higher contours. Criteria to be eligible for sound insulation under Part 150 includes items such as the residents must be within an airport CNEL 65 decibel contour, and the measured interior noise level within the residence must be 45 decibels or greater. With respect to noise monitoring, airport operators must remain compliant with the FAA policies and procedures concerning the use of airport revenue. The revenue use policy requires that airport operators, such as the city and the county of San Francisco, use its airport revenue for the capital and operating costs of the airport. For example, San Francisco and its local airport environs.
Thank you, Lori. And our last question is, who owns the airspace? Should I, as a homeowner, own a certain amount of space? Joe, can you please take this last one?
Yeah, I can, Alana. Thank you. So the National Airspace System is a resource, and Congress has provided the FAA with exclusive authority to regulate aviation safety, the efficiency of navigatable airspace, and air traffic control functions.
Thanks, Joe. And then on our last slide, I'm just going to hand it back to Tamara for brief closing remarks.
Thanks, Alana. And I want to thank everybody that participated on the FAA panel. This does conclude our presentation. As mentioned earlier, in the coming days, we're going to be closing the amended SURFR procedure in the IFP Gateway. Again, I want to thank Chairman Hindi. I want to thank the San Francisco Roundtable for hosting us tonight. I know that we went a little late. For follow-up questions and comments, we've provided the links that are on this final slide for the audience to find additional information and provide those questions or comments through the noise portal. Thank you.
Okay, back to me.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. Before I go open it up to the members' comment or questions, I really believe that I have to go back and make sure that I'm abundantly clear. This roundtable does not have the resources to address the impact of aviation noise on communities far outside the airport. We have discussed this before, and this membership has said we do not have the resources and we will not do it. With that being said, I just want to remind everybody where the recommendation on the SURFR procedure came from. Again, it came from the Select Committee on South Bay Arrivals, and it did not come from the Roundtable. Further, it did not come to the Roundtable, it went to the congressional representatives. So for members of the public that want to pursue this, these are the background information. This is the background information, and this is probably, you take that into consideration where you want to take your questions further. The FAA has just posted, and I wouldn't mind having that the slide where the contact for the FAA being put up again. That would be helpful for members of the public. That is where you need to contact to continue your engagement with the FAA regarding the SURFR procedure. I want to go ahead and open it to members of the roundtable, but before I do that, let me find out, I'm going to respectfully ask the members of the public who want to speak on this item to raise their hands so I know how many people will be speaking, so I could manage the time on that to allow everybody the opportunity to speak. While you're doing that, I'm going to go ahead we're going to keep this slide up so you could take that information. And I'm going to go ahead and open it up for members of the community roundtable. Let me see if anyone, I see Jennifer, and I'm not sure if Jennifer, member of the public. Who is Jennifer? Can someone help me?
Oh,
Jennifer Landisman, sorry.
Yes, that is a member of the public. That is not a member of the roundtable. I apologize for
Okay, I'm sorry. That's okay. I see her on the panelist. Any members of the roundtable have any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, let me go ahead and expand. Okay, not that many so far. Okay, so we're gonna continue to keep, I'm gonna go ahead and keep the same time allowed for any other item for members of the public. And before I do that, before I go to the public, let me just make sure that just kind of everybody is on the same expectation. That we were informed by the FAA that they will not be answering any additional questions on this subject tonight, but will be listening to all public comments. As you are looking at on the screen, the FAA has provided information where and how the public can submit further comments or questions during the presentation, and will provide the information again at the end of the public comment. So I think I'm gonna, if Angela could manage to put her clock up as well as keep the slide, I would like to keep the slide up. So that would be wonderful if we could do both at the same time, or not. Maybe Angela, if you could keep the time and let us know when the time is up. I also want to note that we have received over 24, I think, emails from the public commenting on this item. And I also want to let the public know that we shared those emails in their entirety with the FAA prior to the meeting. I know there were more emails that came very close to the beginning of the meeting. We did not get a chance to share those with the FAA, but we will definitely be forwarding those to the FAA as well. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to the public. First hand I see is Mark Scholl.
Hi, Mark Scholl, Palo Alto. First of all, I'd just like to comment, it actually was the airport and the Roundtable that initiated the BSR well before the select committee was even created. I'd be happy to forward the letters sent to the FAA to initiate those projects. The FAA, in fact, I followed the project very closely and multiple FOIA submissions. The FAA spent an amazing amount of time trying to make the BSR work. It just doesn't. It's too steep for modern aircraft. And I think it would be much more productive to focus on improving the surface force structure, which does have well-known and proven problems. One of the main problems is over energy coming off the surface structure at Eddy. This was well demonstrated when SFO ran the ADT Beta 4 models and when United flew the test flights. The United test flight pilots could not slow down sufficiently after Eddy because they're being over energy coming off surfer without speed brakes, aggressive flap deployment, and even early deployment of landing gear. There is not, and I don't agree that speed brakes are not used on surfer. Almost all 320s, 319s, and the most modern aircraft, which are highly efficient and have trouble slowing down, need to deploy speed brakes after Eddy because of the over energy problems coming off of the surface force structure. So I think the FAA needs to look at these problems, look at fixing surfer, look at doing maintenance on surfer, rather than 5 years of trying to move to something that is technically just not possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scholl. I will then call on Rebecca Ward, followed by Bill.
Hello, it's Rebecca Ward from Palo Alto. I do want to comment on Ms. Holmes' assertion that surfer is an OPD, which I understand it is, and that it's a totally idle descent. No braking at all was a quote of hers, and it's not flawed. The prior speaker talked about the issues. I'm going to read directly from an SFO report on surfer that they did as part of the testing for their GBAS implementations, because clearly the FAA has no idea what they've implemented. And I live under the Eddy side by waypoints. And so I think it's important that you do. So what they said, and this was presented, existing approach required significant energy reduction techniques, speed brake deployment, either between Eddy and side by or side by and Heman, higher flap settings. Those are all so extremely noisy. Early gear deployment. There's nothing about that that's idle or quiet. And it's really disconcerting that after millions of complaints have gone in, that the FAA got up and told us that it was an idle descent and it didn't have problems. As it relates to safety, there are numerous, like 17% of the flights that were captured in noise monitoring had Class B excursions. And these are not like ATC always telling them to descend in a controlled manner. These are often planes going below the Class B safety of the Class B air shelf without being directed to do so. So it is not safe and is certainly not quiet. So I really hope that the FAA takes a look at what's going on in reality, not on some talking points. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Ward. I will then call on Bill, followed by Mary Jo Fremont.
Good evening. My question is the select committee recommendations for the BSR overlay was rejected because all the recommendations were not approved. Is it possible to have a partial of those recommendations approved and negotiate or work around, work through the other things that are not within the FAA's requirements? It was odd that they just rejected it because they couldn't fulfill all, but not do any sort of negotiation, do a partial. Can we do a partial? Second thing is to submit a consistent recommendation, would I go through your website and the website that you provided and start all the paperwork using that methodology? Thank you.
Sorry about that, I was mute. Thank you. I will then call on Mary Jo Fremont, followed by Adina.
Mary Jo Fremont, Palo Alto. There were some scary statements from the FAA tonight. One was this roundtable is the most appropriate body to discuss SURFR. No, it is not. So obviously the FAA doesn't know where SURFR goes and doesn't know what the SFO roundtable charter is because they really don't want to do anything on arrivals. The other statement is nothing needs to be corrected on SURFR. The FAA is convinced that everything is great, it's an OPD, and according to the FAA, it's not noisy, and it's more efficient, it increases efficiency. So I don't know who are all the nutcakes like me who are just complaining since March 2015 because it's really noisy. And from the fuel efficiency, I'll just point you to your FAA website, where at least the FAA has admitted that next gen for the NorCal Metroplex has not been more efficient. And in fact, the San Francisco arrivals path have increased. So that has not reduced fuel efficiency. The other thing that the FAA says is you create noise abatement procedures. You said that, that's great. Well, where is the noise abatement procedure that the FAA can create? You have all the data, you have all the information, but what we hear, and I think it was from Ms. Garcia, no, the FAA will look at proposals based on community consensus. The problem, it's impossible for a community to know what to propose because we don't even know the FAA design criteria. They keep changing. So whatever we propose will always be rejected. So bottom line is, the problem is documented. You need to maybe change your attitude and realize that there is a noise problem with SURFR and it is not that efficient. You can just look at the vectoring and you just need to come and approach the communities that are affected and work with them and use your brain and your knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fremont. I will then call on Adina, followed by John Perry. And after that, we only have one more hand raised from Jennifer. Adina?
Yes, thank you. I would like to first say thank you for opening up this discussion, acknowledging and honoring the First Nations people. And I think that's very important. As a PhD in psychology, I'm speaking from a different perspective. And I have to also say there are great concerns in what I'm hearing from the FAA. And I'm here to call out the dishonesty, saying there's nothing wrong or needing to be corrected when you are clearly and repetitively stating that your efficiency and your desire to make dozens of controllers' complaints minimized takes precedence over the mental health and well-being of thousands of people on the SURFR route. Millions of complaints of how it's destroying people's peace of mind, mental health, and I absorb through my own eyes the effects it's having on the environment and the animals in our area. We do not live in an urban area. We live somewhere rural where the environment needs to take precedence and needs to have a voice and be represented. And I feel that it's very disheartening to show and all the work that's been done by people before me. I'm new to the scene, but I want you to know this fight is not over. This is the beginning of my piece of the puzzle. And I have to say that it's very clear that working with the FAA is not necessarily the best course of action because you're proving yourselves to be very dishonest and disingenuous. And I need to call that out because as I believe in the goodness of all people, you're not demonstrating that you're caring about the well-being of the people and the environment over your efficiency, productivity, and possibly your profit margin. Thank you.
Thank you, Adina. And I did get a last minute hand raised. So we would like to ask members of the public to all raise your hands now if you would like to speak so we know how much more time we need to allocate to this item. So I have 4 hands raised. I will call on John Perry, followed by Jennifer.
Thank you very much. Had to find the mute button there. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great, thank you. So the first thing I want to say is that you're talking so much about consensus, and the consensus, the overwhelming consensus, is that there is too much noise, and it's been going on for too long. The statement that only consensus proposals will be considered is a dodge because the competing municipalities, airlines, homeowners, local, national, and international commerce will never agree. And so the FAA thinks that a good excuse is the same thing as an effective plan, but they're not fooling anyone. We all know better. Now, one of the speakers from the FAA cited, quote unquote, dozens of complaints from the ATCs over restoring BSR. What about the thousands of complaints that the public has generated? Now, FAA controls the airspace, yet they repeatedly cite market forces as a driving force behind congestion and noise. At what point does the FAA decide that too many flights are requested? Because the airports and the airlines certainly won't voluntarily reduce their profits. You've repeatedly said from the FAA that you attend all roundtables, yet there are no roundtables for the South Bay and Lorenzo Valley arrivals. You are abdicating your responsibility to the taxpayers that fund you. Safety is not just about airline crashes. It's about the ability to sleep. It's about the ability to work from home. It's about the ability to go out in your backyard and have a nice quiet afternoon like I could do for 15 years before Surfer. So please cut the fooling around and step up and find a solution that works. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. I will then call on Jennifer, followed by Alistar 5, and then followed by the last hand, which is Mary Jane Donofrio. Jennifer?
Thank you, Jennifer Landisman. I have a couple of comments. First is about time-based flow management. It was interesting to hear that it's already been working since 2015, because when the select committee, the first meeting for the select committee was at SFO, and former SFO president John Martin, at the time, he apologized to the folks in Santa Cruz for the noise that had been caused by Surfer. And then he turned to the rest of us, which are from Palo Alto, and he said, and your problems are going to be solved by time-based flow management in like about 2 or 3 years. So I just want to mention that because there's clearly a disconnect between the information that the FAA raises and the ones, the information that we're hearing. And part of that problem is that we're not really talking about noise. We're always talking about aeronautical language, which is not the language that we speak. The other comment is that it was repeated often that the FAA abides by NEPA in that it's working with the CNEL and a number for noise significance. And there is a study that disproves there's no scientific evidence that supports the FAA's thresholds of significance. And the FAA, it was not mentioned at all, at least in the parts that I heard today, that the FAA is undergoing a noise policy review. So that is an unacceptable answer. The last one is about having similar goals with the airlines. I mean, our taxpayer dollars go to the airlines and they were used for stock buybacks. I mean, billions of dollars, and yet we can't figure out how to put noise monitors in the areas that are affected. So yes, this is a great start, but we need to just actually talk about noise in the future and not about just the aeronautical language. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jennifer. I will then call on Alistar 5, followed by the last hand raised, Mary Jane Donofrio.
Hi, I would like to just briefly commend the FAA and its process, which, as was mentioned, thousands of hours were expended on this evaluation of the select committee recommendations. But it's important, noteworthy to me that the FAA's evaluation basically looks at what the select committee actually voted on. It was very difficult in the 8 months of deliberations for the select committee to reach consensus. And when they did so, the consensus was not to simply move the track. It was to move the track only in conjunction with 9 noise mitigating criteria, which then turned out to be unfeasible in implementation. To simply move the track is not what the select committee voted on, and the FAA did absolutely the right thing by not considering a partial implementation. Thank you.
Thank you. I will call on the last hand raised, Chairman, and that is Mary Jane Donofrio. Ms. Donofrio? It shows that she has accepted the request to unmute, but we are not hearing.
There you are. Are you there?
There you go.
Okay. So I think it's important to mention that the select committee also made a recommendation where they voted unanimously on 4.1. Who makes recommendations to who? Where they said that the FAA should be charged with the responsibility for identifying any changes to procedures. We need the FAA to come back and tell us what needs to be done to fix this, not just tell us that we need community consensus. From the beginning of time, I believe Tamara Swan was involved, whether it was Dennis Roberts when he was the administrator or she was acting administrator before, and sent out many letters that said that the FAA, the design of the new procedure is ultimately subject to the design criteria and safety operational requirements, and that all 9 criteria will not be met. I don't understand how that was the reason why it didn't happen. There is no roundtable for Santa Clara and Santa Cruz County. How are we supposed to meet and come to a consensus? We need the FAA to come back and tell us how to move forward with this. That's it.
Thank you for your comment. And with that, Chairman, we do not have any more virtual hands raised for this item.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Montes. Let me thank the FAA for joining us today and for their presentation. Let me thank the members of the public, those who wrote to us and those who came in today and those who shared their comments and questions. Again, the FAA had posted where members of the public can reach out and continue with their suggestions or their questions, and the FAA will respond accordingly. With that, I'm going to go ahead and move on to item number 10, member communications and announcement. Any members has any communication, announcement, or comments that would like to share with the roundtable? Seeing Member Schneider.
Just for something a little bit lighter, Millbrae will be celebrating the grand opening of our rec center that was destroyed 6 years ago by arson. But June 11th from 10 to 2, we're going to be cooking and entertaining. Please come on down and see our brand new rec center that should be net zero. And tomorrow morning, if you like to get up early at 9 o'clock, we are doing a tree planting with our Friendship City Ramallah. and Malta, Mosta in Malta. We're doing it with all of our cities across the world. We're planting olive trees for a moment of peace at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning at our rec center. Thank you, and keep safe, everyone.
Thank you. Congratulations on your rec center. I've been to a tour on it in the early stages. It looks impressive.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, anybody else? Seeing none, let me go ahead and again, thank you all for your patience and being with us on a late meeting. Again, like I said, this is an unusual meeting in a sense, and hopefully we get back next time to our time frame that we don't hold you over too long. Thank you so much. Our next meeting, our next scheduled meeting. Oh, let me go first. Any public comments on item number 10? Before we.
Thank you, Chairman. There are no public comments on item number 10.
Thank you so much. With that, we'll go to item number 11, which is adjournment. Again, thank you, everyone. Our next regularly scheduled meeting will be Wednesday, August 3rd at 7 p.m. With that, I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to adjourn. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Good night, Sam.
Thank you.